My name is Miriam A. Mal, and I am 28 years old. My boyfriend told me to stay home because he was embarrassed to introduce me as his girlfriend before his high school reunion. I said, "Absolutely." Then I used that night to move out completely. He came home at 2 in the morning to empty rooms and a note that said, "You don't need to be embarrassed anymore." But before that note, before the silence, before he realized I was not the kind of woman who begged to be included, there was the sentence that ended everything. The blazer was a slash of crimson against our beige bedroom wall. Nolan Pierce stood in front of the mirror, turning slightly, checking the line of his shoulders with the kind of anxious intensity usually reserved for court dates or first dates. "Do I look like I peaked?" he asked, smoothing one sleeve. "You look incredible," I said, and I meant it. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, the one we had assembled together 2 years earlier, while laughing because neither of us could understand the instructions. Back then, Nolan called me patient. Back then, he said I made impossible things feel manageable. Now my praise was just background noise. He sighed dramatically. "Jessica posted the final guest list. Tyler Briggs is coming. Apparently, he runs some crypto advisory firm now. Drives a G-Wagon." I nodded, not sure what he wanted from me. I had heard about this 10-year reunion for months. It had transformed from a casual maybe into a military-grade campaign. New blazer, new haircut, new cologne, sudden interest in spin classes, endless scrolling through classmates' LinkedIn profiles. I assumed my role was simple: supportive girlfriend, arm candy. Or maybe just the arm. "So what's the final plan for Saturday?" I asked. "Are we meeting your group there or going straight to the venue?" He stopped moving. In the mirror, his eyes met mine, then slid away. He adjusted the blazer again, though nothing was wrong with it. "About that," he said. The room changed temperature. The hum of the central air filled the space between us. "Look, Miriam," he began, turning to face me with a practiced expression, half apology, half condescension. "It's a specific crowd. A lot of successful people from my year. Lawyers, consultants, founders. Sarah's husband is a cardiothoracic surgeon. Amanda married that tech guy who sold his app. It's just..." He waved one hand vaguely toward me. "I don't want to spend the whole night explaining what you do." I stared at him. "Explaining what I do? You know what I mean." He gave a small laugh that did not reach his eyes. "IT help desk. Between projects. Studying for certifications. Still figuring out your path. It becomes a whole conversation, and honestly, it's embarrassing." Embarrassing. The word landed in the room like something heavy dropped on glass. A memory flashed through me, sharp and uninvited. 2 years earlier, Nolan had sat on this same bed, crying after a failed presentation at his marketing internship, convinced he had ruined his future. I had held him, ordered his favorite pho, and spent the entire night rebuilding his deck on my laptop because he could barely see through panic. At 3 in the morning, he whispered, "You're my rock, Miriam. I'd be lost without you." Now, I was not his rock. I was the weight around his ankle. I looked at him, really looked, at the perfect haircut, the expensive blazer, the worry in his face that had nothing to do with hurting me, and everything to do with being judged by people he had not seen in 10 years. The man I loved was behind glass now, pointing at all the things outside that suddenly looked more valuable than me. I did not get angry. I did not plead. The fight drained out of me in one quiet breath, leaving only clarity. "Absolutely," I said. Relief flooded his face so quickly it almost made me laugh. "You're the best," he said, stepping over to kiss my cheek. It was dry, quick, transactional. "I'll make it up to you. We'll order that fancy sushi tomorrow. Just us. It'll be better than dealing with all that drama anyway." He turned back to the mirror and grabbed his phone. "I need to text the group. Jessica bet you'd throw a fit." His thumbs moved fast. I could almost see the message. "Crisis averted. She's cool with it. I was cool with it, just not in the way he thought. Absolutely, I said again, softer this time, a promise to myself. The campaign was over. The withdrawal had begun. The click of the apartment door locking behind Nolan was the starting pistol. For a full minute, I did not move. I stood in the living room, listening to the silence he left behind. It was different from the silence in the bedroom, where his word, embarrassing, had hung between us like smoke. This silence was wider, cleaner, a stage after the actor had delivered his final line and stepped into applause he had not earned. I walked to the window and peeled back the blinds just enough to see the street below. Nolan's rideshare pulled away from the curb, red taillights dissolving into Saturday traffic. He was gone to stand in a room full of people he had not seen in 10 years and pretend he had become someone larger than he was. I watched until the car disappeared. Then I let the blind fall back into place. My phone was already in my hand. I called Avery, my older sister. She answered on the second ring. "Shouldn't you be getting ready for the big reunion thing?" "I need your truck," I said. My voice sounded calm enough to frighten even me. "Nolan told me not to come. He said he was embarrassed to introduce me as his girlfriend." There was a pause so sharp I could hear her breathing change. "Say that again?" "He said I'm embarrassing. I'm leaving tonight. While he's out, I need the truck and I need your hands." Avery did not ask if I was sure. She did not tell me to sleep on it. She only said, "I'm on my way." That was why she was my first call. The next 2 hours became a lesson in detachment. I moved through the apartment not as a heartbroken woman, but as a salvage operator. Everything was sorted by ownership, necessity, and whether it still smelled like a lie. I started with documents: passport, birth certificate, laptop, banking files, certification notes, the small lockbox with my grandmother's bracelets, and the emergency cash Nolan never knew I kept. Then clothes: jeans, work shirts, jackets, sneakers, the plain black dress I wore to interviews. I left the shirt Nolan bought me for his cousin's wedding, the one he said made me look presentable. Let it hang there like a little flag of everything I no longer had to be. The furniture required harder math. The bed frame was his, a trendy, rattling thing he insisted matched the room. The mattress was mine, bought with my first decent bonus. I stripped the sheets and left them in a pile on the floor. The mattress I dragged into the living room and leaned against the wall, a white rectangle of memory and exhaustion. My bookshelf was mine, solid oak, found at a flea market before Nolan ever decided my taste was too practical. I emptied it fast, book after book into boxes, the dull thud of paper sounding strangely final. The TV was mine too. I unplugged it, wiped every profile, logged out of every shared streaming account, erased my viewing history, erased my passwords. Digital doors closing, one by one. Avery arrived while I was wrapping coffee mugs in newspaper. She took one look at me, then at the half-stripped apartment, and her face went still with controlled fury. "Tell me what to lift," she said. We worked in efficient silence. Desk, chair, mattress, bookshelf. My old armchair from before Nolan, the one he called ugly because it did not photograph well. Halfway through carrying a box of kitchen things, Avery stopped in the hallway. "Miriam," she said softly, "are you okay? You're scaring me a little." I set the box down and looked back into the apartment. It was becoming a carcass, a place where a life had been carefully removed from the bones. "I feel clear," I said. He turned on the light. "I'm just walking out of the room." Avery nodded once. "Then let's finish." The final thing was the note. I sat at the bare kitchen counter on the last chair left in the apartment and wrote it by hand because typed words felt too generous. No accusations, no pleading, no emotional doorway for him to pry open later. "Nolan, you don't need to be embarrassed anymore. I've taken all traces of me. My half of the rent is paid through the end of the month. The key is on the counter. Do not contact me. Miriam. I read it once. It was perfect because it gave him nothing to argue with. I placed the note squarely on the counter and set my key beside it, the last object tying me to that place. Avery and I carried the final box down. Her truck held my life in a careful, uneven stack. When she shut the tailgate, the sound echoed through the parking garage. "That's it?" she asked. I looked up at the apartment window. The living room light glowed over an empty floor. That's it. We drove away. I did not look back. The first week at Avery's place felt like living inside a blank page. Her spare room was small, white-walled, with one window facing the side of the neighboring building, and a mattress that dipped in the middle no matter how carefully I positioned myself. It was perfect. There was nothing of Nolan there. No cologne on the pillows, no blazer thrown over a chair, no framed photos where I had trained myself to look happy in the background, while he filled the center. For the first few days, I simply existed. I went to work at the IT help desk, answered tickets, reset passwords, explained basic network issues to people who treated the internet like a haunted object, then came home and ate takeout with Avery on her couch. She did not push. She did not ask me to cry on schedule. Sometimes she would glance at me like she was checking for cracks, but mostly she let silence do what silence needed to do. The numbness protected me at first. Inside it, I began dismantling the life I had shared with Nolan piece by piece. I changed my primary email address. I removed him from every shared account. I unfollowed every restaurant, band, bar, and mutual friend whose feed felt like a doorway back into humiliation. It was not anger. It felt more like gardening, pulling weeds from a yard I had abandoned for too long. Around day 10, the numbness cracked, but not with sadness, with possibility. One evening, instead of scrolling through old photos and torturing myself with alternate versions of the past, I opened my laptop. For years, I had talked about getting a cloud security certification. Nolan always made the same face, half bored, half indulgent. "Sounds expensive, babe," he would say, "and you're already so tired after work." Somehow, I had let that become a reason to delay my own life. That night, I found the course. I registered. I paid for it with the money I had been saving for a weekend trip Nolan wanted because, according to him, we needed to look more spontaneous. The confirmation email landed in my inbox, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. I started waking up early. Coffee at 6, study notes by 6:30, work by 8. The protocols, architectures, permissions, and threat models soothed me in a way people never had. They followed rules. They had cause and effect. They did not call you embarrassing after years of letting you hold them together. I reached out to Leo, an old college friend who had drifted away after Nolan once called him kind of depressing because Leo preferred quiet bars and actual conversations. We met for a beer. He asked what happened, gently, like someone approaching broken glass. He was embarrassed, I said. Leo did not ask me to explain it into something softer. He just nodded. Then he was stupid. We talked about basketball, office politics, and the absurd software both of our companies insisted on using. I laughed once, unexpectedly, and the sound felt rusty in my throat. Not happy exactly, but alive. That became my new normal. Smaller, quieter, entirely mine. Nolan's voice still echoed sometimes, embarrassing, but it got fainter with every page of notes, every solved practice question, every conversation where I did not have to translate myself into someone more impressive. Then the first crack in his world reached me through a message from Derek, a mutual friend who had always been neutral enough to trust. "Hey, hope you're okay. Saw Nolan last weekend." Wow. Just wow. I stared at the preview for a moment before opening it. Derek explained that Nolan had shown up at the reunion alone, tense and over-polished, smiling too hard. People asked about me. Nolan gave some vague excuse about me having work commitments. Then Sarah from his reunion committee said, "Oh, that's a shame. We were all looking forward to meeting Miriam." Nolan used to say she was his rock. I stopped breathing for 1 second. Derek said Nolan froze, went red, could not form a clean sentence, spent the rest of the night near the bar with Jessica, drinking too much and trying to laugh off questions no one was asking kindly anymore. Tyler Briggs, the G-Wagon man Nolan had been so desperate to impress, apparently asked if Nolan was always this unstable. Unstable. The very thing Nolan had been afraid of looking like. I read that line twice, then placed my phone face down on Avery's kitchen table. I did not feel joy. I did not feel pity. What rose in me was validation. His performance had failed. The audience had seen the cracks, not because I exposed him, not because I fought back, but because once I was gone, there was no one left to steady the stage. I deleted the thread with Derek. I did not need a trophy. I opened my laptop and returned to my next module. The hum of the processor filled the quiet room. It sounded like moving on. The messages began exactly 1 month and 1 day after the reunion. That timing mattered because it was the day after the rent period I had already paid through expired. Until then, Nolan's silence had not been dignity. It had been convenience. As long as my money still softened the fall, he could pretend I was being dramatic somewhere off stage. Once the apartment became entirely his problem, my phone lit up with an unknown number. "Miriam, we need to talk. This is childish. You can't just disappear." I read it while sitting at Avery's kitchen table, my practice exam open beside a half-finished cup of coffee. The tone was so perfectly him that I almost admired it. The offended authority, the way he framed my leaving as misbehavior instead of a consequence. I swiped the notification away and returned to a question about cloud firewall configurations. The firewall made more sense than Nolan ever had. The next day, another number. "I'm sorry about what I said. You took it the wrong way. It was just pre-party anxiety. Come home. We can fix this." You took it the wrong way. There it was, the classic rewrite. Not "I hurt you," not "I degraded you," just "You misunderstood the shape of my cruelty." Come home to what? Empty rooms? A note on a counter? A man who had only discovered my value after the rent became inconvenient? I did not answer. On day 3, the message softened. "The apartment is so empty. I can't sleep. I keep thinking I hear you in the other room. This is cruel. Please say something." Cruel. The word almost made me laugh. He was alone with the absence he had requested, and somehow that was my violence. I pictured him walking through the hollow apartment, past the spot where my bookshelf used to be, past the blank wall where my armchair had sat, finally hearing the echo of everything I had carried for him. It was not me he missed. It was the infrastructure. A week later, Jessica called. His reunion lieutenant, the one who had helped plan the night he decided I was too embarrassing to bring. I let the first call go to voicemail. She called again immediately. On the third ring, I answered because some doors need to be locked directly. "Miriam, finally," she said, voice brittle with manufactured concern. "You need to call Nolan. He's devastated. He isn't eating. He's a mess. What you're doing is honestly cold." I said nothing. "He made one mistake. People say stupid things when they're stressed. You two had a life together. You can't just punish someone forever because they panicked before a reunion." When she paused, probably waiting for me to explain myself into a smaller shape, I spoke calmly. "Jessica, this isn't your business. I wish you well. Do not call me again." Then I ended the call and blocked her. 2 nights later, a voicemail came from another unknown number. Nolan's voice was loose, ragged, probably drunk. "You arrogant bitch," he slurred. "You were supposed to fight for us. You're supposed to prove me wrong, not leave me looking like the bad guy. Now everyone thinks I'm unstable. They pity me. Fix this, Miriam. You owe me that." I listened once, then again. Not because it hurt, but because sometimes you need to hear the truth without its costume. He did not miss me. He missed the role I played, the steady girlfriend who would absorb humiliation, return home, soothe him, and make him look lovable again. I deleted the voicemail. The ambush came at my gym 2 weeks later. Nolan knew my Saturday morning schedule because I had kept that routine even when he mocked it as productivity theater. I walked out after a workout, towel around my neck, legs sore in the clean, satisfying way, and saw him leaning against my car. He looked smaller. Not physically exactly, just diminished. His hair was messy, his eyes tired, his expensive jacket wrinkled at the elbows. Without a room to perform for, he looked like a man who had run out of lighting. "Miriam," he said, pushing off the car. "Please, just look at me." I stopped a few feet away. "You shouldn't be here." His eyes filled quickly, too quickly. "I was stressed. I didn't mean it like that. You know how important image is in my industry. I was just trying to fit in." "That was your choice." He stepped closer. "You're my person, my peace. I can't do this without you." There was a time those words would have opened every locked door in me. Now they sounded borrowed, like lines he had heard in a movie and hoped would work. He reached for my arm. I gently removed his hand. "No, Nolan," I said. "I'm not." His face crumpled, then hardened, panic turning sour. "So that's it? You're just done?" "Yes." I unlocked my car. "Miriam, don't do this." I opened the door and looked at him one last time. "You already did." Then I got in, started the engine, and drove away while he stood shrinking in the rearview mirror, finally part of the scenery I had left behind. 6 months is a long time when you are rebuilding a life from the studs. Avery's spare room became a memory. My new apartment was small, sunlit, and quiet, in the way I had once thought would feel lonely. Instead, it felt clean, mine. There were new books on the shelf, coffee beans in a glass jar, a second-hand couch that did not match anything but was comfortable enough to fall asleep on, and my cloud security certification framed on the wall beside my desk. I got promoted 2 months after passing the exam. Not a huge promotion in the dramatic sense, but enough. Security analyst, a title that did not need air quotes, a salary that made my shoulders drop an inch, a path that no longer felt like something I was trying to explain to people who had already decided not to respect it. I was not finding my way anymore. I was walking it. I also joined a study group for advanced security architecture. That was where Leo came back into my life more fully. The same old college friend Nolan had once dismissed as kind of depressing turned out to be sharp, patient, and dryly funny in a way that made complicated things feel less intimidating. We were not romantic. There was no tension, no performance, no desperate need to impress. We studied, complained about bad course materials, drank too much coffee, and laughed when one of us explained a network concept so badly it became useful. That Saturday, we were at our usual coffee shop, a bright place with huge windows and plants hanging over the counter. I was drawing a terrible diagram on a napkin, trying to explain a penetration testing concept with a rectangle, 3 arrows, and a sad little fence. "So the firewall is just this neglected fence?" Leo asked, grinning. "A neglected, underfunded fence with trust issues," I said. He laughed, and the sound was easy. Nothing in me tightened around it. Nothing in me asked whether I was being impressive enough. Then I felt the air change. A cold shift, like someone had opened a door behind me. I looked up. Nolan stood 10 feet away, just inside the entrance, holding a to-go cup he clearly had forgotten existed. He looked older, not in years, but in wear. His hair was styled perfectly, his coat expensive, but it hung on him like a costume from a role he had lost. His eyes locked on me, and I watched the emotions pass through them one by one. Shock, hope, jealousy, then the awful comprehension that I had not been waiting in some emotional storage room for him to come reclaim me. Leo followed my gaze. "Friend of yours?" "Not even remotely," I said calmly. Nolan walked toward us with the determined stride of a man trying to turn panic into purpose. He stopped at our table and ignored Leo completely. "Miriam," he said. "Hi." "Nolan." His mouth tightened at the lack of warmth. "Can we talk for a second, privately?" I did not move. I held my coffee cup in both hands, feeling the heat through the cardboard sleeve. "There's nothing to talk about." His eyes flicked to Leo, and something ugly crossed his face. "I see you moved on." Leo straightened slightly, but I raised one hand just enough to stop him. Nolan's voice sharpened. "Is this why you left? You had him waiting? Was I just some placeholder while you planned your little upgrade?" There it was, the final rewrite. If he could not be the victim of abandonment, he would become the victim of betrayal. Anything to avoid the simple truth. He had told me I was an embarrassment, and I had believed him. I set my cup down and looked at him fully. Not through him, not around him, at him. For the first time, his presence did not pull me backward. He was not a wound anymore. He was information I had already processed. "Nolan," I said, my voice low and steady. "I left because you told me who you were. I believed you." His face flickered. "My life is peaceful now," I continued. "You are part of a past I don't think about. I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you've been chasing, but it has nothing to do with me." He stared at me like he was waiting for the hidden hook, the anger, the tears, the proof that he still mattered enough to hurt me. There was none. "Please have a good day," I said. Then I turned back to Leo and picked up the napkin. As I was saying, the real vulnerability isn't the fence. It's the assumption that nobody will test it. I did not watch Nolan leave. I did not listen for footsteps. My focus narrowed to the coffee, the sunlight, the terrible diagram, and the friend across from me who knew better than to ask for a performance. After a moment, Leo glanced toward the door. "Everything okay?" I looked at him, and this time my smile was real. "Yeah," I said. "It was just a ghost." And it was.